David,
Hey, Peyton.
good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming on.
Oh, anytime. My pleasure.
I been wanting to tell this story. I don't think I've told it to you. The first time we ever met. Do you remember that?
Of course I do.
We had lunch
We did.
down in North Kansas City. Um, I was very intimidated because all I just knew was that there was this guy. He's kind of helping run this company, and he's from California, and he's driving back and forth, and that's really all I knew. And so we go to lunch, and that was with my corporate company at the time, and
Hmm.
I was only in that account manager, client-facing role for, I don't know, it had definitely not been more than a year. I think 6 months.
Right.
And I was I had a routine, and you quickly saw right through that. And I remember you asked me something that I've never really been asked before when it comes to recruiting, and it was, "Well, Peyton, what do you think I need?" And you said it to me several times, and you were really what you were trying to do is you were having me understand your business first, and then find where the pain points are, and then say, hey, this is the kind of talent we should bring in. At least that's what I thought you were trying to tell me.
Right.
And it was a great experience for me because it really got me out of my comfort zone. And ever since then, I just gotten to know you better. I think it's been 4 or 5 years we've known each other now,
It has.
and
Yeah.
kind of went by quick, didn't it?
2011? No. I'm sorry. 2000.
12.
No. 14. I started coming back,
Mm-hmm.
back and forth,
Okay.
and we met very shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
So.
And you've really helped me with the current business and just understanding that and providing a lot of guidance and leadership. And I'm forever grateful for you
Oh,
on that. And I feel like we've known each other a lot longer than this. And you have ties back to the East Coast as well. And I've been around the East Coast as growing up. And you're from New Jersey originally?
born in New Jersey.
Okay.
Lived there for a very short period of time, and then my father was with Bell Laboratories and was transferred to Boston. So spent the first 18 years of my life on the East Coast, New Jersey, Boston, and then ultimately raised in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So
And you went to, is it Cornell?
ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
after high school, went to University of Pittsburgh, and back then, 1974, figuring out what I wanted to do. Thought it was pre-med, very heavily in math and sciences and natural tendency in subjects like that. So I went to school for 2 years and did well, had fun, and didn't feel settled, and really wasn't focused on that being the end game of my career. So I ended up taking some time off, and I think that's when the journey began, which has really evolved, like many things, over until present day. So
You're still on the journey.
still on a journey,
Mm-hmm.
although this has been an incredibly enjoyable stop, probably my last professional stop,
Mm-hmm.
as we currently know it. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Which cities, places have you lived in?
So seatbelts fastened.
Mhm.
So Pittsburgh, and took some time off after that. Moved back to the East Coast and started getting involved in hospitality. I had worked some restaurant jobs when I was younger, and had the opportunity to work in a nightclub chain, an expanding nightclub chain, which took me from the Lehigh Valley to Philadelphia, and then ultimately in 1980, when they were passing the gaming referendum in Atlantic City, moved to Atlantic City and worked there, managed the nightclub, got approached to help open Harrah's Marina Hotel Casino, which I did in 1981.
What was Atlantic City like in 1980? Because
So-
I've never been to Atlantic City. I don't think I did. We went to Mohegan Sun on occasion, which is in Connecticut.
Yeah, northern Connecticut.
But does that have any relation to it?
Not at all.
Okay.
I think Atlantic City, and I don't remember it vividly when I was young. We went there when I was a child, but it used to be an incredible summer resort. And families would go down there and enjoy the beach, and at night would get dressed up and walk along a boardwalk. And then during the 60s and early 70s, denigrated pretty significantly. And the city was in financial despair when they passed the gaming referendum, which at that time was only Las Vegas and Atlantic City. And the first hotel was a renovated property, which became Resorts International. So it had attracted a lot of people on the East Coast, and not from a tourist perspective at first, but a professional and a working opportunity. And I was among the many who went down there and said, okay, this is going to be really hot. This is going to be great. A lot of young people and people trying to get into the casino industry. And at first there was one, and then very quickly 2, 3, and 4. And Harrah's was one of the early properties to be newly constructed. So as I was managing this nightclub, I got approached by someone. You get to know people, and they said, everyone's recruiting as well. We wanted to be part of it, and they were looking for talent. And I got asked to join the opening team. Eye-opening experience. Yeah. And ended up working there for 3 years. And during that time, I came to the realization that although I had found myself in a horrible position, I was very young, making a lot of money, and many people they were caught in that trap. But there was one day I went to work and I said, well, this is great.
How old are you?
At that time, I was 24 and a half.
And had you graduated college?
No. Only went to school for 2 years.
Okay.
So I had been doing this for about 3 years, 3.5 years, and I was in this position and had this epiphany, and I said, this is great, but do I really want to do this, when I'm old, like 40, I was 40, I wish.
Right.
And the answer was no. So I researched some, hospitality being my background, researched some educational opportunities, and decided if I was going to go back to school, I wanted to go to the best possible program. And at that time, and I think still today, Cornell University has the School of Hotel Administration, which has an incredibly broad reputation for producing industry leaders in not only operations, but real estate, finance, marketing, human resources, and everything concerned with global hospitality. So I did some further research, and I realized that the executive vice president of Harrah's, who was officed in our hotel, was a Cornell graduate. And I just made an appointment one day, and I went to chat with him, and long story short, had a life-changing encounter. And he said, you know what, if this is your dream and if this is what you want to do, then this is what, you should go after. And he ended up writing me this glorious recommendation. And the ensuing 3 or 4 months was a whirlwind. Filled out applications, went for an interview, ended up getting accepted to this program, and really never looked back.
What attracts you about the hospitality? And that kind of, because that is such a beast, especially being a nightclub promoter. We're not a manager in that whole industry. What did you like about it?
I think when you're in your early 20s, what's not to like about it? It's very gregarious, people-oriented, fast-paced, plenty of opportunity. And so for me, I had worked in food and beverage operations. I had worked in lower levels of restaurant management, and it was fun. And you're working with a dynamic subset of people, and it's always changing, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. But it was an industry that at that time, I said, this is really expanding rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going into school, my background was primarily food and beverage and operations. But during the course of that experience, it just opened my eyes to the wealth and breadth of opportunities in hospitality. And I ended up graduating with a degree in finance and facilities, which is really design and architecture.
Okay.
But it wasn't concentrated.
Okay. And then what'd you do after you got your degree?
So during school, I had worked summers, and the summer before I graduated, I had an internship with a consulting firm, a CPA and consulting firm in LA. And what the consulting division did was feasibility and financial analysis for prospective hotel deals. And that opened, my whole experience base to a lot of different professionals that I hadn't worked with before. And you would travel, whether it's regional or national or international, and you would look at the feasibility of developing a hotel and determining financially what it would take, what it would require, and whether you could even develop a property or not. And ended up doing that for a short period of time. Changed companies also in LA to an even more focused firm, and became involved in deal structuring, all related to hospitality and mixed-use real estate.
How was that transition from the East Coast to the West?
It was fun. I mean, at that time, California was nothing more than what we see in the media, or what we saw in movies, television. And in the 80s, lived in Los Angeles in the 80s, was fun. Newly married, working with some great professionals, all of them very, very intelligent, very energetic, exciting. LA was exciting, and incredibly livable at that time.
And how long were you in California?
So all told, about 4 years, and met a fellow colleague that I was working with. Pardon me. Great guy, who was moving back to the East Coast. And he suggested that we go into business together. And
What was the business?
well, I'm going to get to that.
Yeah.
He was firmly rooted in northern Delaware, the Wilmington area.
Okay.
Beautiful part of the country. And he was going to go back there with his family and open a real estate company. And he was an MAI appraiser by training and professionally. So I joined. I said, well, sounds interesting. Ultimately joined and ended up moving back to the East Coast. And we took his appraisal business and expanded that into consulting, hospitality-related consulting services and development.
So it sounds like you've always kind of had an entrepreneurial bug that you've been chasing.
I never thought I did.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw myself as an entrepreneur, but from that point, when I left California, it's been a very entrepreneurial existence, professional career.
And then you also, one of your stories that you were down in the Caribbean. How did you make your way down there?
Well, there's lots of stories in between that, but so from Delaware, I had opened a restaurant, had my first baby, and found myself overwhelmed with work. And I think I went 2 years with 2 or 3 days off, and it was just no life balance.
Mm-hmm.
Life balance wasn't really a term back in the day. Sold my restaurant, took 6 months off, changed diapers, became really good at it, and decided I needed to get back to work. So I had reached out, and there were a lot of opportunities, and someone that I had gone to Cornell with, and who had actually been one of my associate professors, reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in working for Hyatt, which of course I was. Ended up interviewing with Hyatt, ultimately moved to Chicago, and worked at the corporate office in their technical services division. And what we did at that point, there was maybe 50 of us. We would get involved in new construction as well as renovation of existing properties. And we all had regions, and it was nationwide. Not a lot of international work, but really exciting work.
Mm-hmm.
Some projects that I was involved with was the renovation of the Grand Hyatt in New York, which was our partner was Mr. Trump at the time. Didn't deal with him personally, although met Ivanka Trump along the way.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
It's pretty cool.
And she was awesome, very sweet.
Yeah.
Somewhere in some storage box, I have a note, a thank you note from her. I would love to find it.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah.
So Hyatt was a wonderful experience, fantastic company. I worked with an incredible group of people, supervisors, peer groups, support staff. Really one of the best experiences I've had in my professional career.
How big was Hyatt at the time when you were working with them?
That's a great question. They were 104 properties domestically, and I can't recall how many internationally. I'd like to say 30, 40, 50, somewhere around there. But we worked strictly on the domestic properties. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s. And what happened was they passed the new tax law, 1986 tax law changes, which affected depreciation in real estate. So everything that was in the pipeline was built, but by 90 and 91, if you look back historically, very difficult times in hospitality. So I saw, and I was part of, a contraction of our division, which went from 50 down to 20 to 10, and ultimately 4 people. So I was number 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I had to scramble
Yeah.
a little bit, didn't know what was going to be next,
Mm-hmm.
although it was something, that's for sure. So domestic hospitality was probably at one of its lowest points at that period. It's very cyclical in general.
And that was
91.
And that was mostly based because of the new tax law?
Yeah, they affected the tax law, and so your project had to make financial sense, had to be fundamentally sound.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, accelerated depreciation would allow you to run a property that didn't really make money, but it would be used to offset profits from other ventures that you had.
Okay.
That's a simple version of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, please keep it simple here.
It was simple. It was really simple. So I didn't know what to do. talked to an old friend of mine who remains a friend of mine, a lifelong buddy. And he was going to the island of St. Croix frequently to visit a friend of his. So I said, that's interesting. Read up a little bit about the island, and I said, I'm going to apply for a job there. So I put an ad in the local St. Croix paper, and
How'd you do that? From Chicago.
What do you mean?
I mean, there wasn't the internet, was there?
There was internet.
There was internet.
There was internet.
This is mid-90s?
This was early 90s.
Okay.
I know there was internet because I had this exorbitant AOL bill that forget how much that was.
You had dial-up.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all there was.
That's all there was. I remember that.
So I don't really remember how it happened. He might have even brought me a local St. Croix newspaper.
Oh, cool.
And I just applied.
Yeah.
I forget how I sent it. I don't think I sent it electronically. I think I mailed it in and whatever.
They did that back in the day?
They had stamps.
Wow.
It was great. And you'd go to the post office box and just stick it in there, and it got wherever.
It's all foreign.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. So I had forgotten about it. I'm, looking at other opportunities, and I'm doing some consulting work, and I get a phone call from a lawyer in northern New Jersey who was a partner in this deal and asked me if I wanted to investigate it further. So again, long story very short, went down there, saw the property, interviewed, got hired, and the next thing you know, we're getting ready to move to St. Croix. And it happened very quickly. So I did some research, and I said, well, how do I get my stuff there? And, how do I get down there? And, I'm asking myself these questions. And in retrospect, moved way too much stuff, to the islands. Could have probably halved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out the best way to get down there was through the mail. Not for me, of course, but packed up my stuff, and you could, certain dimension of boxes, which was pretty big, and took them to the post office, like 4 or 5 at a trip. And I think there was maybe 20 or 25 boxes of stuff. Didn't need furniture, but, stuff. So I send it, to my attention, my name, general manager of this hotel. And it was supposed to take 3 or 4 weeks. So I planned ahead and I got it all down there. As it turned out, I got there in about 7 days, which means the current general manager had no idea that he was no longer going to be the general manager.
Ouch.
Was the recipient when they asked him to sign for these boxes of my stuff.
Wow.
With my name.
Mm-hmm.
And my title,
mm-hmm.
which was his title.
Mm. So did he throw them all in the dumpster?
No, they called him. I told him I mailed the owners of the hotel. I told him I mailed the stuff, and I said, it's okay. Well, won't take long to get,
mm-hmm.
3 weeks. He goes, no, it's already there. It's already there. So they had called him, spoke with him, and it all worked out. It was fine.
So how long were you in St. Croix?
A couple of years, and was a...
And you were just managing the day-to-day operations of the hotel?
So it was a distressed property following Hurricane Hugo, devastated the island of St. Croix. St. Thomas received a lot of federal funding, was quickly rebuilt. St. John had no interest in rebuilding, although they were devastated. They were very eco-tourist centric, and they didn't want to rebuild anything beyond basic infrastructure, heat, light, all that stuff, power, I should say.
Did I tell you that my sister went and lived in St. John's for a couple of years after she went to law school? The restaurant I think was called Johnny's.
I don't recall you did. No, that's great.
Yeah, so she had a blast. So anyway, keep going.
So this was a distressed property, and it had changed hands, and it was a hotel component as well as condominiums that were built. Not successfully sold. Again, the economy at that time was in somewhat of a down, in a trough.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond operating the hotel, it was really helping to refinance it, reposition it, not from a marketing perspective, but purely financial. And we did that successfully, refinanced the debt, and stabilized operations.
So like an island like St. Croix, what percentage of the economy is based on tourism and people staying at the hotel?
I don't recall. It was significant. They also had a tremendous, they were well known for their rum, and I don't recall very much other, commercial enterprise. Tourism in general.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, they didn't have a port. They couldn't accept large cruise ships. I believe, if I recall, it was damaged during the hurricane. So it was a lot of day trips and people coming over from, other islands in the chain. But we did well.
And so you make your way back to the United States.
So yes, little bit of island fever.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not getting an opportunity to be with family as much as I wanted to, and decided to come back to the States.
How big is St. Croix?
Don't recall. Population was maybe 30,000. But the island was big enough. I mean, you hear about island fever, and it was great. You get to know everyone. You really cover all points of the island. But I never felt that, it was. I never felt trapped. It was really beautiful. It was like many experiences. It was a lot. I look back at it very fondly, and the people were just amazing.
I think a lot of people dream about doing that.
Go for it.
Yeah, right?
All I can say is go for it,
Yeah.
and don't send too much stuff down,
So you had this incredible experience down on the islands.
Incredible experience.
You're like, okay, it's time to get back to the States, got family.
Right.
Next chapter.
Right.
So then what do you do after that?
Really wanted to get back to Chicago.
Okay.
Not a lot of opportunity still at that point. We're talking about somewhere around 93. Hospitality industry still working its way out of the trenches. But I ended up meeting, I know what I did. I said, all right, I want to, if I'm going to go back, I want to work at the best possible operation I can find. So my daughter at the time was in Cleveland, and I did some research, and the best hotel in Cleveland at that time was the Ritz-Carlton. So I contacted them. I think I actually called them. I didn't. There was no mail. Contacted human resources director at the Ritz-Carlton, and I said, the next time I'm in Cleveland, would you like to get together? I'd like to talk about opportunities and see what might transpire. Mm-hmm. So I went up there and I met her, and a lovely woman, and she said, I will keep in touch with you, and we'll see what we can do. Mm-hmm. Went back to the islands and hadn't heard anything for a while, and then received a phone call, and she said, I said, great. I said, what's happening at the Ritz-Carlton? She says, I'm no longer there, but I'm with a company called Club Corporation of America. Club Corporation of America was the largest club management company in the country. So it was country clubs, city clubs, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
She said there's a fascinating new club opening in Shoreby, or I'm sorry, in Cleveland. It's called the Shoreby Club. I said, okay, what is it? She said it's an old mansion right on Lake Erie that a bright young developer bought, and he's building upscale housing around this old mansion. I said, great. What is there, a golf course? Or she said, no. I said, are there like tennis courts? Or no. I said, so what is it? She said, it's a dining club. I said, okay, so tell me how that works. And essentially, people bought memberships to this facility simply to have the opportunity to go dine there and hold small meetings and weddings
Mm-hmm.
and what have you. I said, well, that's fascinating, and I'd love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought me up there, and it was this beautiful building that had been restored. It used to be, it was the Mather Mansion, and Samuel Mather, he was the partner of John Rockefeller.
Oh.
So Rockefeller had all the oil and
Mm-hmm.
natural, resources, and Samuel Mather, he controlled the shipping lanes of the Great Lakes. So from his mansion, he used to have a separate library, and the library was this beautiful 8-walled, huge room that he would sit there, and he would watch his ships coming
Wow.
in and going out
Wow.
of Cleveland
Fascinating.
to the refineries.
Right.
So this developer, again, bright guy, brilliant guy, built all these beautiful homes, renovated this mansion, built dredged out a canal, built a marina. I forget how many slips, 40-ish maybe.
Jeez.
And it was gorgeous.
Wow.
So ended up moving to Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. You were sold.
I was there, yeah. Started working with Club Corporation of America, another incredible group of people, and was in the private club business.
Wow.
So
Okay. And how long were you there for?
I was there for a couple of years, and we did some exciting projects. We added guest rooms to the mansion. Again, it was a fairly nascent operation,
Mm-hmm.
so helped stabilize that. Again, with an incredible team of marketing and membership and culinary staff. The culinary staff was incredible. This was literally some of the best food I've ever had anywhere, and proud to be part of that. So at that time, desperately wanted to get back to Chicago. We had family in that area, and it was really a focus.
Mm-hmm.
So reached out to an old friend who used to sell us product. He was in, this is where my brilliant hospitality career goes to the dark side of manufacturing. So this guy used to sell us fabric when I was at Hyatt. You'd meet a lot of vendors, and everyone wanted to sell you their product. He was a lovely guy, and reconnected with him, and he said, take a look at my company and see if you'd be interested in buying it. I said, okay, send me the financials, and we'll take a look. So I looked at him, and great potential, leaving a lot of money on the table, tremendous opportunity, and all that good stuff. And it was a way to get back to Chicago. So I did it. And we moved to Chicago. And this was a textile company. So I was no longer in finance. I was no longer in operations. I was now in the textile industry. I'll make it very, very long story, very short. Every year we continued to buy the company. Every year it was more and more successful, and ultimately didn't sell to us ended up selling to a huge national company.
Okay.
All right. So I said, that was interesting, if I look back at that whole experience.
So you helped build it.
Help build it.
But you weren't able to
buy it.
Okay.
And it's not a big deal. Took it from maybe $1 million a year business, and it had been $1 million a year business for more than a dozen years, and helped build it up to 8 or 9 million.
Wow.
In 3 years. Pretty short order.
Yeah.
So ended up getting let go. Sold it to a very large company. Got let go, which was fine. And at that time, I was one of my hobbies was building. Renovating my house and doing whatever. So my hobby quickly became promoted to my career. So started my own development company, construction and development company, and did that for about 6 or 7 years. Had 2 more children along the way. Life is growing, everything is going. And I was at the point in 2006 where I either had to grow the company, hire people, or kind of wind it down and figure out what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, I looked brilliant because I wound down the company in 2006, 2007.
Right before
there was no
economy.
Yeah. Still had a family,
Mm-hmm.
had mouths to feed, and reached out to a friend. That's the beautiful thing about the hospitality industry. The network
Seems incredibly well connected.
It's incredibly well connected. And it seems like a huge industry, but really the players never change. They do different things, and even today, there's so many people that I've known over my career that are still involved in hospitality. So with the textile background, and again, reaching out to a very good friend of mine, I moved back to Boston and got involved with a company that manufactured textile products for the hotel industry. And this time a little smarter, joined with the intent of buying some equity in the company. And after the stipulated period of time, it was about 3 years, went to exercise my right to buy, but they weren't in the mood to sell. So we parted ways, worked everything out, everyone's happy, and then got a phone call from another friend, former business associate, who had followed a similar path in the manufacturing industry, and he said, "Let's open our own company." I said, "All right, well, let's try that." Ended up moving to Southern California and started Warp and Fill.
Warp and Fill.
Which is the company that operated that for 4 years and ultimately sold that to Fabri-Quilt,
which is where you are today.
Where I am today.
Whoa.
You asked the question.
That was great. Okay, so, and what does Warp and Fill stand for again?
So when you weave fabrics, there's long yarns, if you imagine, on a huge spool. Those are called warp yarns. And then the yarns that go back and forth as the fabric is being woven, those are called the fill yarns. So we changed Phil, F-I-L-L, to characterized him as Phil, P-H-I-L.
Clever.
And the beauty of that, it's cute,
yeah.
But the beauty of it is no one can talk about textiles. There's no other way to describe how a textile is constructed without saying the words warp and fill. So every time one of our competitors would go talk about their product, talk about how it was constructed, they would mention our name.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've been with Fabri-Quilt for a couple of years now.
Since, well, they bought us in 2014.
And what does Fabri-Quilt do?
Fabri-Quilt is an incredible company. It's really 6 different companies, family-owned, second generation, established in 1962 or 1965, been around for 62, 63 years. And they have operations that serve the retail sector, selling printed fabrics to all the major stores that we buy, Joann, Hobby Lobby. They also have a commercial division which quilts fabric for linings that go into a lot of workwear product that we know, Carhartt and Refrigerwear and Wrangler, big names like that. They have a lifestyle vertical gardening company that they used to sew the pockets for.
Wally Grow.
Wally Grow. Well, it used to be Woolly Pockets, and now it's evolved into Wally Grow. The hospitality division, which they had one, and when they bought Warp and Fill, really differentiated themselves from the rest of the market, and that has grown tremendously over the last 4 years. So very diversified.
Yeah, I've been down there many times, and I'm always fascinated by the building. The best way that I can describe what you guys going on down there is on the Science Channel, how it's made. I don't know if have you ever seen that? Where they show, you guys, I think one of the most fascinating lines or pieces of the warehouse that you guys have is when you manufacture the polyester from scratch.
Oh, the batting.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the cooking, the giant oven. The machine is, 50 yards by 50 yards almost.
Yeah.
And it's pretty incredible to see all of that, how it's being created from scratch. And so has Fabri-Quilt been in North Kansas City since their inception?
My understanding is they have. The owner of the company, his father started it. And from what I gather, I have not had the honor of meeting him. Very smart gentleman. Years ago, he left the East Coast and decided to specifically locate in the center of the country. Moved out to Kansas City and created the company. And his son, who is the current owner, very forward-thinking, very bright, has every intent on growing the company and keeping it, Kansas City-centric.
How is technology integrating into textiles?
Well, it's integrating. It's in so many different ways. How we're designing the product. And we don't weave textiles. We're really a manufacturer.
What's the difference between that?
So what a textile mill will do is they'll buy yarn, spools of yarn, and just weave millions and millions of yards coming off of numerous looms. What we do is we take that product and we are base manufacturers. So whatever the industry is, retail, wholesale, hospitality, we'll make the product. The one difference being the batting operation that you saw, we actually take the raw polyester fiber, process it, and create the fill that goes into many of our, jackets and thermal products.
And you guys obviously have, I think you guys are over 100 employees, if I'm not correct. And you've had these incredible experiences at all these different companies, your own companies, large corporations. Bring it all back to Kansas City. What do you think the workforce is like in Kansas City compared to some of these other cities?
Kansas City is a phenomenal little microcosm having lived in Chicago, which is probably the closest I can relate to Kansas City. Kansas City is such a manageable, highly professional, highly attractive area. And what's happening now in the last, as you know, 4 or 5 years, your generation, younger generation of employees and management talent are gravitating towards the metropolitan area for all the right reasons. Mm-hmm. Affordability, professional opportunity, just interaction and sports and everything that we find attractive in a living environment. So for us, and with your help in the past, it's really been the highlight of my career to be able to meet and work with and help train the next generation of leaders. And it's incredible how deep the market is, although it's very competitive. Mm-hmm. And we're competing with high tech, we're competing with medical, we're competing with other industries. But I think that we've been so fortunate in generating the interest we have and developing the talent and the management of the future of that company, of our company.
How have you seen the Millennial Generation? Because I know you've interviewed and worked alongside a lot of millennials compared to the generation before that. What are you seeing of the biggest differences, negative or positive? Be brutally honest.
I think they're smarter. I know they're in many ways not more intelligent, but they're smarter. In that they really value life balance. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of the company is we really promote that. We don't micromanage. We ask people to come in, not leave their brains at the door. Check your ego, but bring your brains inside. Do what you need to do. Be part of a team, and when you're done, go home. Yeah. Enjoy your evening, enjoy your weekends. Keep an eye on what you're responsible for completing. But, back in the day, it was almost mandatory that it was never stated, but if you didn't put in 14, 15, 16-hour days, you were never going to get ahead. And in retrospect, you're never going to get ahead anyway. Mm-hmm. And the team that we're working with now, it's one thing I find really impressive.
And to go back to the team, what are some of the morals and values that you guys have at Fabri-Quilt that you try to encompass and pass along and spread throughout the company?
The beauty of Fabri-Quilt is the hierarchy is very flat. There's no pyramid. You don't need to go talk to someone else to ultimately, if you want to walk into the owner's office and you have something to talk about, walk in. So the ethical basis of our operation is we're all there for one reason, and it's a very interdependent, I use that term a lot with the team, very interdependent group of people. No one is more important than anyone else. No one can do their job without the assistance of everyone, and that goes for the owner or me or Barry, who's the COO of all the companies. Mm-hmm. It's a very pleasant working environment. Yeah. So if people understand that, the fear of failure, the obstacle of intimidation, that you sometimes feel in companies, or the need to impress, none of that exists.
Mm-hmm. What gets you excited about the next upcoming years here for Fabri-Quilt?
I think the most exciting thing is the growth and development of the team that I'm working directly with. Some of them have been there 3.5, going on 4 years. And it's clearly evident that they're stepping up and that they are going to be the next generation of leaders. So early in your career, there's a natural tendency. It's not healthy, but it's natural. You want to protect what's yours. You want to make sure that you get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And later in your career, you realize that you can't move on until you find someone to replace you. And that's what, for me, has been most enjoyable.
Do you think that you're able to identify that?
Identify that?
Yeah, identify your replacement?
Not currently, but no, I'm kidding. Yeah, of course,
Mm-hmm.
already identified them. But it's not a single person. It's this team that's in place now has the competence and the abilities
Mm-hmm.
to manage the company moving forward.
Do you think that's going to be the key for overall growth for the next couple of years? Is what these team leaders do?
Well, they'll be part of it. And what's most enjoyable, or one of the more enjoyable aspects of the company, is the owner's vision and everyone's collective vision of continuing to evolve, continuing to innovate. So people may be doing something currently that, and there are examples of that they're now off into a totally different direction within the company. And I don't think that's going to change. I think what's going to happen is there will always be opportunities, and people will, you find your natural
Mm-hmm.
position.
Lastly, what kind of brag about Fabri-Quilt, like the size, the growth, the different countries that you guys are in? I know that you don't really have a lot of competitors nationwide. Can you talk about that just briefly?
I think we're more humble than to brag. I mean, you're only as good as the service you provide. So from that perspective, there's a handful of competitors, really competent companies, and some of them do things far better than we do. But no one outworks us when it comes to the customer service experience and the value proposition that we try to bring. We're not perfect, but it's our primary focus. So when we look at our growth and when I look at the company,
Mm-hmm.
what I think I'm most proud of is the direction that we ultimately want to proceed in. And that is provide the best possible experience for the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it will take care of itself.
Mm. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, I don't know if you want to be contacted directly or through Fabri-Quilt, but you can kind of tell folks how they would go about doing that.
Well, it all depends what perspective that is. If they'd like to get in touch with me personally, email or phone, email's probably better.
Mm-hmm.
If they're looking at opportunities or interested in the company, I would actually have them call you.
Okay.
So
That's good.
yeah.
Well, it's been awesome.
Yeah,
I learned a
it's
lot
been-
about you and the journey, and I really appreciate your time and you coming on here.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's been great, man.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.
Peyton. You bet.
All right.